Director, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, anchor.
So I'm joined by Dr. Annapurni Subhramaniyam, who is a director at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. And our discussion is on the launch of Isro's X-ray Polarimeter satellite. Dr. Subhramaniyam, a warm welcome to you in the program.
Thank you for having me in the program.
So for the benefit of our listeners who've been watching with keen interest the probes and missions to the moon, the sun and the planet Mars, they would like to know what is the field of astrophysics and what does it mean for ISRO to launch an X-ray polarimeter satellite?
So astrophysics is connected to study of things in the sky. So the things in the sky would mean that it could be as close as the nearby planets, or it could be comets which come and go, or asteroids, or things much beyond that. It could be stars, it could be galaxies and groups of galaxies and the beginning of the universe, etc. So study of things which you have it on the sky is generally called as astrophysics. And in order to study them, we have been having telescopes on the ground of various wavelength. But if you want to study kind of a radiation which is not allowed onto the surface of the earth by our atmosphere, because our atmosphere protects some of the radiation coming from outside. For example, X-ray. So X-ray doesn't reach the surface of the earth. But if you want to capture these emissions, because if you want to know what is happening out there for these stars, then you have to place your telescope or detector above the atmosphere. So there is an important role played by the Indian Space Research Organization, which has built the capacity to launch rockets so that you can put your instruments at any distance from the surface of the earth. So once you decide where you want to put it, the mission not only puts the instrument, but also knows how to operate it, communicate it, and make it functional. So this capacity building, along with the science requirements, together make this scientific payloads, and also ISRO has been doing it perfectly over the years. So this is yet another mission on the very first day of 2024.
Dr. Subhramaniyam, you spoke about ISRO's launch of the X-ray polarimeter satellite, which is able to catch X-ray emissions outside of the Earth's atmosphere because the atmosphere blocks these X-ray emissions coming into the Earth. So the satellite, because of its travel in space, is able to catch those emissions. What are we trying to understand by catching these X-ray emissions? What is the route of the satellite and what is the scope of our reach from that satellite?
So the satellite was mounted on the C-58 PSLV, and then it was launched this morning, and it reached the orbit of 650 kilometers in a circular orbit. It was a perfect launch, as well as the insertion was also perfect. That is what the chair ISRO mentioned in the broadcast to the nation. So immediately after going into the orbit, the solar panels were deployed. That was the first thing to do because it has to generate power. And then only you can start the operation. So once you can get the power, and step by step, they start the operation phase. And then there will be initially verification, because you need to verify whether everything is working fine. Then the science operation will start. Now, this instrument is a very unique instrument. We have X-ray instruments on the previous mission called AstroSat, like the LAX-PC or the CZTI. A couple of instruments are there. They take the pictures in X-ray. So it's not just the pictures in X-ray. This is going to detect the polarization. So this instrument is specifically designed to detect polarization of X-ray coming from objects such as black holes and neutron stars. And why you want to study polarization? Because it will tell you the cause of X-ray emission in these objects, and also the strength of magnetic field, which is one of the root cause for the formation of X-rays in the physical processes by which the X-rays are created in these objects. So it is this the deeper probe for understanding the physics and the mechanisms operating around the regions around black hole and neutron stars.
So is there any particular black hole or a neutron star that the satellite is targeting for research and study, as you mentioned, which is emitting X-rays?
Many of them are very bright, and they're also very dynamic, because the accretion process which happens around the black holes, it could be like centers of massive galaxies. There are various numbers and various names for these various types of galaxies, where the central black hole is very active and it produces a lot of high energy radiation. So there are a certain target list which the science, the PI and the team, the instrument team would have already set up. They will be looking at initially to characterize and then continue to look at it. And another important thing is these are not stable systems. So they go through flaring and quiet phases and, active phases, etc. So once there are indications that some are going to be active and going to have large emission and flares and X-ray, etc., they will monitor the systems to understand the basic physics, what's happening there.
And could you tell me something more about what are the other benefits from X-ray missions, especially with the keen interest our listeners have after not only the ISRO launched probes and missions that have been successful, but also you have distant objects coming into our own orbit like Oumuamua and such objects, which has been a subject of astrophysics and public study. So what is your thinking regarding the other alternative uses for this type of satellite?
So this is a very specific satellite. It's not a very big satellite, and this is also not a multi-purpose satellite. So this particular instrument this particular payload has got a very specific scientific aim to understand the physical processes in black holes and neutron stars by studying the polarization in X-rays. So this is not going to be a general purpose, looking at various types of objects in the sky, producing pictures like the James Webb telescope, etc. It is not the mandate of this mission. But having said that, the smaller missions also have a purpose to play, because these missions will give targeted science results and will be able to accomplish very specific goals, but very important goals. And the other mission which flew 2 years back, that is IXPE from NASA, is the imaging X-ray polarization experiment. That is also producing images. So this particular experiment will produce images as well as spectra. So this is kind of a unique. But why do you want to have such kind of an experiments is because you need to do capacity building. You need to have a capacity in terms of human resources, capacity in terms of infrastructure. If you want to move ahead and have broad base in space technology and ambitions. So these success stories and capacity building are extremely important for the younger generation to look up to and dream big and expand and step into areas which have not been explored so far.
Dr. Subhramaniyam, this special instrument, the X-ray Polarimeter satellite, which has been launched into space around the Earth, what is a payload for it? Because in scientific circles, whenever we talk about a PSLV launch, any type of launch by NASA, we talk about the weight of the payload as well. So how would you characterize this particular launch in terms of payload?
So the actual weight of the payload is about less than 500 kg. So this is launched on PSLV C58, and the payload is payload means science instrument. But science instrument, if you make, let's say you have a camera, the camera by itself you cannot launch. You have to have other mechanisms around it. Like when you take a picture, you need to have a storage mechanism, you need to have some communication mechanism, how to receive the commands, how to execute the commands. So onboard computer is important. And also some thrusters which will actually make sure that the whole system stays in orbit and stays in the same trajectory. So the entire thing, the instrument integrated with it's called bus, satellite bus, everything together becomes the payload. So the picture you saw leaving the orbit, that kind of a picture is already displayed after the successful insertion. So that is the entirety of it. Now that after the launch, what happens is the C4 platform, once it releases, today we saw that it was released at a altitude of 650 kilometers in a circular orbit. So the science requirement will decide at what height one needs to place that instrument and what orbit it needs, and depends on how much visibility they need, etc. So these are all science requirements and also mission requirements.
Dr. Subhramaniyam, you spoke about the study of neutron stars by this X-ray polarimeter satellite. They also emit a great deal of light. So is this scientific instrument which is launched into space, is it also multifunctional beyond X-ray but also looks at readings of light and other types of energy matter?
No, so this is specifically looking for X-ray polarization. This is not a multi-wavelength observatory class mission. It's not like that. It is an observatory in the sense that it has got two instruments, but it is for a very specific purpose. If you compare it with AstroSat, which is completed 8 years in orbit actually, It was launched in 2015. That is a multi-wavelength which is starting from optical to hard X-rays, 200 kV. Here it is only looking at a small part of the X-ray and only X-ray polarization. So it is a very specific instrument. In the case of AstroSat, we have UV imaging telescope, soft X-ray telescope, the LAX-PC, which stands for Large X-ray Proportional Counter, then the cadmium zinc telluride imager. So these are 4 specific different energy range experiments which will look at different parts of the sky. So compared to AstroSat, this is different and it's got a very specific purpose.
Dr. Subhramaniyam, even though the satellite is being controlled by Isro on Earth in terms of its trajectory and its sensors, what is the life of a satellite like this in space?
Yeah, so I'll get to AstroSat once again. The nominal time of AstroSat was mentioned as 5 years when it was launched in 2015. Now, AstroSat is also at an altitude of 650 kilometers. And we have now actually crossed 8 years in operation, and most of the instruments are functioning pretty well. So it is continuing the operation. So the two things right now, if you look at XPOSat, this is nominal lifetime is 5 years now. If the instrument stays alive and all the required components are functioning pretty well, and also this, as I mentioned, there would be thrusters and there would be fuel on board this payload and satellite because it has to maintain the orbit and reorient, etc. So if there's an efficient use of the fuel and the thrusters and everything is functioning well and the mission is able to control the orbit and keep it properly and all the communication and everything is functional, it will go on. So it will depend on multiple things, but everything works and we have seen it working, it can continue for longer period.
Dr. Subhramaniyam, we would like to conclude this interview with your comments about the team behind the successful launch of ISRO's X-ray Polarimeter satellite, who has been influential in its successful launch so far, and is something you would like to share with the team.
We know that the Raman Research Institute in Bangalore was very much involved in the making of the Polarimeter imaging payload. The spectroscopic part is also made in Bangalore at the Science Application Center of the wing of the ISRO. And they are all colleagues and extremely proud moment that their instrument is up in space, and we look forward to seeing the data coming down. And it is also yet another RRI's pride because Raman Research Institute has become one more institution which can make and deliver space class instruments. So as I said, the capacity is building. And launch and operation and a successful completion of a mission requires large teams spread across the country, spread across various organizations. It's a huge teamwork, huge network. So we know how to do all this across institutions, organization, large teams working together to make sure that everything functions well. And ISRO's well-oiled system with respect to launch, operations, etc. from various teams have been working extremely well and also supporting the scientific community with their explorations. So I think it has been an extremely productive journey and we look forward to more such launches in the future and scientific explorations.
Do you have a word for the Make in India where parts, components are manufactured locally in this space program, which has caught the attention of the entire nation?
Yes, so there are many things which are procured locally and many companies do participate in not only the making the components and during the launch and also for the instruments as well. Many organizations are involved and also it also builds up the human resources which are also required for Atmanirbhar Bharat and also making our startup ecosystem. So the ecosystem has to grow with the more infrastructure, more human resources, training, etc. So all these are helping in that direction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Annapurni Subhramaniyam, for being with us on this program and talking to us extensively about the complexities of the launch of ISRO's X-ray Polarimeter satellite in very simple terms for the benefit of our listeners. Thank you so much, Dr. Subhramaniyam.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on launch of ISRO's X-ray Polarimeter satellite. The participants were Annapurni Subhramaniyam, Director, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, Anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.
समाचार सेवा प्रभाग से प्रस्तुत है हमारा साप्ताहिक